Have you ever felt like your life is shifting, but something keeps pulling you back? You're making new choices, seeing things more clearly, feeling ready for a new chapter, and yet the same patterns keep showing up. The same conversations, emotional loops, the same roles you thought you'd outgrown. What if the reason you feel stuck isn't because you haven't grown, but because you are still living under an old, invisible contract?
Welcome to our Galactic Alchemy podcast.
Whether we are exploring intuition, healing, or higher guidance, you are invited to tune in, not just with your ears, but with your heart and your energy.
I'm Anita, and I work with soul-aligned leaders, visionaries, and healers to restore energetic coherence, awaken truth, and reconnect to the intelligence of the heart.
I'm Azriena, and with my soul alchemy modality, I guide people in multidimensional soul integration, clearing timelines, transmuting distortions, and reclaiming their own unique soul gifts.
This podcast is a space for deep connection, for attuned conversations that clear distortion, awaken soul gifts, and return us to the frequency of who we really are.
There's really a specific kind of experience that's hard to explain, but most of us have felt it at some point. Is that quiet knowing that we've changed, not in some dramatic, overnight kind of way, but steadily, internally. We see things differently now. We respond differently. What matters to us has shifted. We can feel it in ourselves, the way we think, the way we respond, what we're available for now. It's not the same as it used to be. Then we look at our lives and certain things are just still the same. We're still having the same kinds of conversations, still being pulled into the same emotional dynamics, still being seen or even seeing ourselves in ways that we know feel a little outdated. And it creates this strange tension because internally there's a sense of we're not that version of us anymore. But externally, something keeps looping us back into it. There are moments where it feels like we've moved on, but parts of our lives haven't caught up yet. And for a while, it can look like we just need more time, or more clarity, more healing, or to try harder to shift things. But it's not always about effort. Sometimes it's because there are these really subtle, almost invisible agreements still running in the background. The ways of relating, the roles we stepped into a long time ago, expectations from others and from ourselves. And most of them weren't consciously chosen. They formed gradually through earlier versions of us that were just trying to navigate life. So now, even when we are ready for something new, parts of our lives are still organized around something old. And that's what we are exploring today. Because sometimes feeling stuck isn't about not knowing where we're going. It's about being connected to something we've already outgrown. Underneath a lot of what we call feeling stuck, there's often something much quieter going on. It's not that we haven't grown. In many ways we have. Our perspective has shifted. The way we respond has softened or strengthened. And what we want for ourselves isn't what it used to be. And yet, parts of our lives don't seem to reflect that. The same emotional patterns resurface. The same roles seem to find us again, even when they no longer feel like a fit. Most of these were not conscious choices. They formed gradually through earlier versions of us, learning how to belong, how to cope, how to be accepted. And even as we grow, those agreements don't always dissolve on their own. So we can find ourselves trying to step into a new chapter, while still, in some way, honoring something that's old. And that's what we're exploring today. Because sometimes the reason life feels like it isn't shifting isn't because we haven't changed, it's because something we're still connected to hasn't been released yet. So Anita, can I hand this over to you now to break down what exactly is a contract we are referring to right now?
Thanks, Az. When we use the word contract, we're not talking about something formal or literal. We're talking about unconscious agreements that develop over time. These agreements are often formed in childhood, Sometimes they form in families, sometimes in friendships, sometimes in the environments where we learned how to belong. And they can sound like very simple beliefs. I'm the responsible one. I'm the one who keeps the peace. I'm the strong one. I'm the one who takes care of everyone. Or sometimes, I shouldn't shine too brightly. I shouldn't disappoint people. I shouldn't change too much. Those agreements aren't usually spoken out loud, but they quietly become the roles we live inside. And just to lean into that a little more, in the Akashic records, we're often looking at contracts that were made in a past life. And those contracts show up and they can impact our emotional state, our behavior, and the choices we're making. So it's important to sit and think about the choices that you're making and to track back and recognize that if the choices don't feel aligned anymore, they feel a little bit robotic and you're just continually making them out of habit, perhaps pause. It only takes a moment to look at the consciousness of the choice and recognize that you're no longer aligned with that choice. And then you can just create a shift, just make a new choice and give yourself permission to start to see things in a different light. So as we're talking about contracts, I'm the responsible one. That comes back to parentification and those childhood wounds. I'm the one who keeps the peace. That's survival. That's that child in that home trying to survive. I'm the strong one. That's resilience. That's that child who's grown into the teenager or the young adult and recognizes that actually they have developed strengths in response to the environment they were in. So a lot of these statements reflect something greater going on behind the scenes. And the point of today's podcast is to look at why we're making those choices, and are any of these choices or contracts old, outdated, and ready to be released. I would invite you to consider statements like, I shouldn't shine too brightly. That comes back to safety. Standing out too much, making yourself a target, that allows people who feel threatened by you to challenge you. I shouldn't disappoint people. That comes back to core wounds of feeling safe in your own home. I shouldn't change too much. That comes back to a very old contract that you might have had with an adult or a family member, because the underlying statement here is, who do you think you are? Make sure that you don't change too much, because then you would make the rest of us uncomfortable. It's important for us to start looking at these energetic statements that are coming up and really address what's motivating them, what gives them power, what amplifies their power. Are they really relevant to me? Because if they're not, in this new energy, there's a chance here to really let it go and to really shift, and you don't have to do it by yourself. The frequencies that are available to us now are so amplified that you could really lean into it, create a signature statement for release, and let these things go. And when you let them go energetically, you begin to find that the situations you attract into your life have shifted as well. So Azriena, let's talk a little more about where these contracts begin.
So, Anita, many of these contracts begin when we are very young. As children, we are constantly learning what behaviors bring safety and connection. If being helpful brings approval, we may become the helper. If being quiet avoids conflict, we may become the one who doesn't speak up. If keeping everyone happy prevents tension in the household, we may become the emotional mediator. Probably leads to people pleasing as well in our adult life. And at the time when we're young, all these roles make sense. They help us to navigate the environment we were growing up in. But the challenge is that the nervous system remembers these agreements long after the original situation has changed. So, as adults, we can still find ourselves responding to life through roles that were designed for an earlier chapter of our lives. I think, this is where it's reflected in people we meet in our lives who sometimes who just seems a bit more emotionally stunted, or the way they react in stressful situations make them revert back to almost like a child. or maybe when you are in a relationship with an emotionally avoidant partner or someone who's emotionally volatile. I think at this point, we all know that all of that somehow links back and has roots in childhood.
So when we're responding in a way that's reactive, we're leaning into a 3D response. And when we start to see things from a higher perspective and we step back from reactivity and we're looking for the wisdom and we're looking for the lesson there, rather than looking for, how is this hurting me? Am I being attacked? Am I safe? Where is my wound? We're stepping into 5D, or what we call 5D, fifth dimensional response. And this new energy that we're experiencing really upholds fifth dimensional frequency. So if you're able to catch yourself in the moment, pause, and then see how this serves you from a higher perspective, you're going to start to feel that life is working for you, not against you. Everything's coming towards you for a reason, and you have a chance to really shift. And when you do that, life becomes more enjoyable. There's more synchronicity and there's more gratitude on your part. What do you think, Azriena?
So recently, I have witnessed this happening in real time to someone who's very dear to me, to someone whose stages in life and how their life unfolds has been very intricately linked with me. I witnessed everything firsthand. So I have seen the trials and tribulations. I've seen the bright side of this person's life. And the other day, I caught them having almost like an adult tantrum, acting out a little bit, and actually still sitting in the energy and memories of some of the more challenging things they faced. So let's just give this context with regards to this person's career. So this person's talking about how they feel stuck and have all these struggles when they were starting out, and this has given them that trauma, this has made them keep thinking this way. And I just said, hang on, let's step back for a minute. Because what you're doing right now, you are regurgitating these old stories, these old narratives over and over again. And I said, let's look at maybe the last 2 decades of your career. This was what's happened maybe in the first 10. And then maybe a little bit of it spill over into the next 5. I said, but by the time you get into your 15 to 20 years, things have really, really shifted. But why are you not looking at that part? Why are we still going back far, far away? So what lies there? What's the roots there? And this is when I realized we do sometimes keep coming back to the old stories. And why do we keep holding on to those narratives? Even though we think we've let them go, but it's still kind of there. And then I actually got a visual representation of what was actually going on. And I said to this person, I said, let's take a step back, take a deep breath. I said, imagine if all of these old narratives you have is like octopus, tentacles, all the little tentacles, they're like cords and they're still reaching into your nervous system. So there's layers and layers, and they're still taking up space there. These old cords
They're active.
They're active, exactly. And it's just
like running a program.
Yes. So I said, now, how can we alchemize this? I said, let's imagine a bright orange ball or a bright golden ball. I think that day, we used golden and maybe pink, and ultraviolet flame for transmutation. I said, so imagine this golden orb of light sitting just in front of your heart, a few feet away from your body. All of these cords, we acknowledge them, allow ourselves to acknowledge what all of these old, retired, outdated cords are. And so then we just release them and then we put them into the orb. Just let them come out of your body and get into the orb for their own transmutation. I said, these old stories need to be released. We are the one choosing to hang on to them. So we keep looking back. It's almost falling into like a victimhood kind of mentality. I said, stop holding on to that, because past some of the struggles, there has been many, 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 many good times. Why are we not connecting or acknowledging the good times that has come out of that? So to me, that goes back to what is the seed of that contract? Why is it still there? So some of the exercises I've done for myself or I've seen for clients in the etheric space, they can be represented as scrolls, golden scrolls, and we can take these old, retired, outdated contracts that manifest in the etheric visualization as scrolls, put them into that orb for their own transmutation. And there are some really good proclamations we can say around this. Anita, you mentioned some earlier in our earlier chat. Do you care to share some of this with our listeners? What can they say to accompany this visualization where we are releasing all outdated contracts from our system?
So when we place these outdated programs, cords, energy, emotional patterns into this beautiful golden orb, what I would normally say is I set the intention to let go of all cords, all contracts, all patterns, all programming. And then I would identify the emotion that I'm feeling around it. So let's say it's resentment. I would say, what is the energetic statement attached to resentment? The idea that I need to show up and be someone that I'm not, the idea that I'm not enough in somebody else's eyes. I would put that pattern of resentment that's being upheld by the energetic statement of not enoughness, and I would place that into the orb. I would call in my team or a higher intelligence or the universe, whoever you believe in, and I would ask them to come in and remove this energy via the orb and send it back to divine source energy, where they're harmonized and can never harm another. This is a way of upcycling your energy, ensuring that what you're putting back into the universe is positive and of a higher frequency. What about you, Azriena? Because this is one of your big protocols. What do you normally say?
Very similar to what you've just said, add in the element that this is across all dimensions of time and space, so that other versions of us in the other dimensions also reap the rewards of what we are carrying right now. I also like to have this one line which I tend to open my one-on-one sessions with, which is, I call back my power from all places and spaces now. So I think this is also a good affirmation for us to start the day with. It creates boundaries, but it also strengthens us in places where our energy were leaking.
So I love that. I use a very similar protocol after completing the clearing process. And I get people to say it 3 times and they find it very empowering. And the statement is, I call my spirit back. I call my spirit back. I call my spirit back. From all the places that I've left it, known or unknown, seen or unseen, I call my spirit back. And so it is. We take a deep breath in and then we breathe out. We come back into the present moment. And I really love that as a sense of reclaiming your soul after having been through an experience that really may have left an impact.
Anita, why do we think right now it is so important for all of us to be aware of the elements of the old contracts or the old contracts themselves that we now need to leave behind, and that we are not to take these elements or these contracts into the new timeline? How would you break it down?
So a lot of the work that we've been doing around consciousness since, I would say, January 2025 revolved around the idea of Mother Earth shifting. We definitely felt that there was consciousness rising, the frequencies were elevating, and people were having conversations more openly about their spirituality, their belief systems, and what served them. And then when we look around in the world and people are meditating and fasting and opening themselves up to a higher consciousness, and we're looking around at the collective and we're seeing these news reports of things that are happening that are really quite concerning, worrying. Whilst we'd like to see change in the world and to express our concerns, that isn't always a viable option. One of the things we can do is make a change in our direct environment. And the way we do that is to examine our belief systems, really be accountable for what we're doing and what we're saying and how we're showing up. And when something comes up and it's challenging, we really are brave, I think, when it comes to leaning into the harder moments and unpacking them and saying, what can I do here to shift and change my perspective so that I can come into alignment with who I truly am? That requires me to be less reactive. That requires me to take any drama that's occurring in my life or that I'm attracting and sitting there and saying, how does this serve me? Why have I attracted it? What am I ready to let go of? And I think that's how we start to shift these contracts that we've made in our lives. It's consciousness. And one of the biggest tools that I've noticed is communication. And you could think communication is in my wheelhouse and I'm fine. I want you to think about how you communicate in those unplanned moments. How do you respond to stress or confrontation? Do you immediately attack or defend? Is your stress response to fight? Is it, I'm going to leave, I'm going to hang up, I'm not going to have this conversation, I don't want to ever see you again? Is it flight? Or is it freeze, pausing and not saying what's on your heart? The key to clear communication in the midst of freezing is to breathe. Remind yourself that you are capable of delivering a thoughtful response given the appropriate time to formulate your thoughts. When you develop clear communication strategies, you're retraining the freeze response. Recognize that the freeze response is an inner child survival tool. And as an adult, it is safe for you to express your point of view. Can we give ourselves permission to step away and not feel pressured to come up with an immediate response? When you walk away, it is not self-abandonment. You're giving yourself permission to be more thoughtful and to come back with a more accurate response. A powerful way to alchemize the freeze response is to breathe, stay calm, and say to the other person, I'm going to need time to think about my answer, and I'll come back to you. Thank you. And in doing so, you're not resolving the issue. You're breaking the moment down into manageable parts so that you communicate clearly and are able to formulate your own thoughts and ideas. We transmute the freeze response when we communicate what we are able to formulate in that moment, which is, I've heard you, I'm going to think about it, I'm going to come back to you. And now I've become an effective communicator because for now, I have communicated something to you, and it is truthful, and it gives your nervous system the time it needs to recalibrate and to think about what is important. When you express yourself clearly, the body hears it and it begins to heal itself. Your nervous system responds to your voice and to the statements that you make. Sometimes we think somebody's going to be hurt by something or offended. And the truth is, once you find the language to express it, they're very agreeable. They're quite reasonable. So don't always feel you have to solve and resolve everything immediately. And whilst we're talking about communication, let's speak briefly about the perception of being ghosted by someone. By definition of a relationship, we've agreed to be in a contract of communication. And when someone doesn't respond or we feel ghosted by them, it can create distress within the mental and emotional body. Perhaps they've ghosted you, but perhaps they've just gone away and thought, I need the language and the wherewithal to come back and say something impactful, empowering, and truthful. Again, we're back to give yourself permission to take the moment back and really communicate how you truthfully feel.
The other thing why it's imminent that we consciously and conscientiously become aware of the contracts that we no longer need to carry with us is because Earth ascension, the ascension timeline we are on right now, it is beyond anything that any of us could have imagined us being on. And even astrologically, it doesn't lie. The way the planets have lined up, it's just monumental. And so why not ride it? It is here. Why not we ride into it, having shed a lot of the old baggage that we no longer have to take with us? That we owe it to ourselves to do this. Take a look at everything we're carrying with us, the old narratives that no longer serve us, no longer serve our loved ones. And we should allow ourselves to let all of that go. Yes, sometimes there will be a moment of friction as we are settling into this new identity or as we are settling into this new space. But stick with it. Growth doesn't come without discomfort, and so does us shifting in this new perspective and identity. If we zoom out and we look at this from a broader perspective, it's really fascinating, right? Because life moves in cycles and everything in nature evolves. Ecosystems adapt. Even stars move through stages of formation, expansion, and transformation. And we human beings are no different. We are constantly evolving. Our values change, and that's okay. Our sense of identity expands. And as we evolve, the energetic agreements that once shaped our lives and our dynamics with our loved ones or with the people around us also need to evolve. And when they don't, we feel friction. But that's not because we are doing something wrong. It's because our system is trying to move into a new configuration.
That's beautifully said, Azriena. One of the reasons people stay inside old roles longer than they need to is fear. Let's talk about fear for a moment. There can be a fear of disappointing people, a fear of creating distance, or even a fear of losing connection altogether. Because sometimes those roles are tied to belonging. If someone has always been the dependable one, the peacekeeper, stepping out of that role can feel risky. But what's important to remember is that evolution is not betrayal. Growth does not mean abandoning people. It simply means allowing your life to align with who you are becoming. And very often when someone steps out of an old contract, it gives others permission to evolve as well.
One thing I've noticed is that releasing an old contract doesn't always happen in one dramatic moment. Actually, most times it happens very quietly. We simply stop responding in the same way. We pause before saying yes, or even before saying no. We allow a conversation to move in a different direction, and gradually the dynamic changes. So some relationships deepen because they adjust naturally, because the role that once held them together is no longer needed. That's not failure, that is evolution, and it has happened throughout our lives in family dynamics or friendship dynamics more often than not, and definitely in romantic relationships. I find that a helpful way to recognize these patterns is to ask ourselves a few simple questions. Where in my life do I feel pressure to behave in a certain way? Where do I feel responsible for maintaining a dynamic that no longer feels authentic? Where do I feel like I'm playing a role rather than expressing who I actually am? These questions can reveal the invisible agreements that have been guiding our behavior. And once we become aware of them, we gain something incredibly valuable, and that is choice.
So let's talk about creating new agreements. Breaking an old contract doesn't mean replacing it with something rigid. Often it simply means creating space for a new way of relating. And that might look like being more honest about your needs, allowing conversations to change. What would it take for a conversation to change, Azriena?
I think it takes discernment, courage, and self-love. Self-love, to me, is always the starting point. And it is something we can learn to grow into, to expand into. We all evolve with it at our own pace. But from self-love, we develop more courage. We feel it's okay, I can hold my ground, I can stand my ground, I don't have to capitulate, I don't have to people please as much as I've done before. And then you lean into discernment from that, which is you have the courage now to discern and distinguish between what serves you and what doesn't. It's a journey. Be gentle with ourselves, because it can rattle us when we begin to lean into making more courageous decisions or take courageous actions. But that's okay.
Another way to create a personal shift is to let relationships evolve naturally rather than forcing them to stay the same. And when people begin interacting with each other without those old roles, something interesting happens. Relationships often become more authentic because they're no longer based on expectation, they're based on presence. So before you move into the rest of your day, take a moment to reflect. Where in your life might you still be honoring an agreement that no longer reflects who you are? And what would it look like to gently release that contract? We're so grateful to walk this path with you.
With so much love and reverence for your path and for your beautiful, brave soul, this is Galactic Alchemy. We'll see you soon.